Welcome to Cox OC Connection. I'm Lacey Kelly and this is Civic Connection, and I'm glad to be visiting with today Rich Atwater, who is the Executive Director of the California Water Committee, Southern California Water Committee, excuse me. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you very much. I'm welcome to talk to you.
Now, you are the local water guru in Southern California, so we want to ask you first and foremost, what is the water situation in California today?
We are in a critical drought. Over the last century, this is as dry as it's been over the last 3 years. And the big question is, we don't know what it's going to be like next winter. And if it continues to stay drought like this, it'll be really a big crisis for everybody.
Okay. And what solutions are proposed to try to address that issue?
Well, short term, we're asking everybody, I mean, the governor, all our water officials, the Metropolitan Water District, throughout Southern California, we're asking everybody to try and conserve about 20% of what their historic normal use was. So conservation is a key first step. Many of the other things that we're trying to do is we're looking at expanding water recycling, increasing stormwater capture. San Diego, here in Orange County, we're looking at building seawater desalination plants.
Mm-hmm. And Southern California has been historically pretty good at conserving, or no?
We improved our conservation over the last 20 years. We've added about 4 million people and we don't use any more water. So that's an example of how throughout Southern California people are conserving. But when you compare our water use, for example, to like Australia, Sydney, Melbourne use about a third less water than we do today. So there's an opportunity to even do a better job.
Okay, great. Okay, great. We hear about water bonds that could potentially pass to address the statewide and local issues. Can you tell us about that?
Well, back in 2009, Governor Schwarzenegger and the legislature at that time put on the ballot $11 billion water bond. And for a variety of reasons, it was postponed and taken off the ballot in 2010 and 2012. And technically, it's on the ballot now. But the legislature is looking at trying to update it to address the most pressing needs with the current drought crisis. And so this summer, probably in June, early July, they'll make a decision about whether or not we'll have a water bond on the November ballot.
And what kinds of things might be in that water bond?
Well, key is to provide funding for local communities to expand their efforts of water recycling, stormwater capture, groundwater use, developing more local sustainable water supplies. Also promoting watershed and other water quality improvements that would enhance our water supplies.
Got it, okay. Are there any activities, any projects being done to actually expand our water supply?
Yes, there are. There are a lot of different projects. Over the last 20 years, we've spent about $12 billion in Southern California. A couple of large reservoirs, one down in San Diego County, one out in Riverside County. We spent a lot of money on brackish groundwater desalination. Orange County built the largest water recycling plant in the United States. Other parts of Southern California have equally done that. And now we have new initiatives down in San Diego and Los Angeles to expand water recycling in those two big cities.
Oh, that's good news.
Yes.
Okay. You know, when we turn on our tap, we expect the water to come out. We don't often think where it comes from. Could you give us an overview just of where our different water resources are coming from?
Yes. In general, I'll just say Southern California, if you live in the coastal plain from Ventura County to San Diego, which is about 19.5 million people, in general, about half of our water is imported from the Colorado River. The city of LA gets it from the eastern Sierras, Owens Valley, and then from the State Water Project from Northern California, from the area of Sacramento, east of Oakland, is the State Water Project. The other half of our water typically comes from groundwater basins, the rivers like the Santa Ana River, the San Gabriel River, local supplies like that. And so that's our kind of 50-50 balance. But if you live in, say, Dana Point, you're 95% dependent on imported water. But if you live in Anaheim, you're probably 75% on local groundwater. So it really varies depending on where you live in Southern California.
So in some regards, South County has a little more needs to shore up its portfolio water supply, would you say?
Well, and it's based upon the geology and the geography.
Sure.
The northern part of Orange County has one of the largest groundwater basins in Southern California, and over the last 50 years, they've done a really good job of managing it well, expanding its ability to pump more water during a drought. But the southern part of when you get south of Irvine, there's very little groundwater aquifers, so they're much more dependent on imported water. And they're not unique. San Diego is actually more dependent than any other part of the region because they have very little local supplies. They're about 90% dependent on imported water.
Okay, got it. Well, we are hearing more and more about the Bay Delta, and I think that's new terminology for some folks down here in Southern California. Could you tell us what is the Bay Delta and why it's important to us?
Yes. As I said earlier, we get about a third of our water supply for all of Southern California from Northern California, and it comes through what we call the State Water Project. It was approved by the voters, Governor Pat Brown, in 1960. It took about a decade to build it. At that time, it was the largest public works project in the world.
Wow.
$2.5 billion. Doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but $2.5 billion in 1960 was, in real terms, was an incredibly large project. In fact, the Great Wall of China and the State Aqueduct are the only two things that the astronauts could see from the moon.
Oh my goodness.
That's
okay.
man-made. So that's the scale of it. It's like a man-made river.
Okay.
So the State Water Project, it's 2014. It was built in the 1960s. It's about 50 or 60 years old. What we're talking about with the Bay Delta Conservation Plan is where we take the water from the Sacramento River in the San Francisco Bay, just north of Stockton, just a little southwest of Sacramento, has 100-year-old levees. Dr. Lucy Jones, U.S. Geological Survey, professors from UCLA and Caltech have said that if we have an earthquake, those levees could collapse and we would be out of water. Mm-hmm. Not only us, but Silicon Valley. About 2/3 of the population of the state of California depends on water from the Delta.
Okay.
So that's the issue behind the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, is to upgrade the water infrastructure by building tunnels through the Delta, and also do it in a way that protects the environment so that it's fish friendly, and simply build state-of-the-art fish screens, much like they have on the Columbia River and other parts of the United States, so that we have a balanced program of protecting the environment and have a reliable water supply for everybody that lives in California.
Okay, excellent. So as part of that plan, we have these water supplies that are supposed to be increased delivery of water to Southern California, or just protecting what exists?
Primarily protecting what exists. The truth is, in 2008, 2009, and 2010, we actually lost a third of our water supply, and we did have curtailments in Southern California, mild curtailments, but it was caused primarily because of impacts on the fishery, less about drought. So one of the things that we'd like to highlight, that if we make these improvements so that we have an earthquake-proof system, it also has multiple benefits of providing a more stable, reliable supply, whether it's wet years or dry years.
Okay. And how does this project get funded?
It will be paid the same way the State Water Project's been paid since 1960. It'll go generally in Southern California, it'll go on the water bill. And so everybody pays their share by how much water they use. So if you live in Anaheim, and as I said earlier, maybe 70, 80% of their water supply is local groundwater, and they only buy 20 or 25% from imported water, their bill will be smaller than if you live, for example, in San Clemente or Dana Point, where they tend to be like 90% imported water.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some of the things that you hear sometimes is folks talk about the increased cost of water. My question to you is, isn't it true that it's really not the cost of water, but the cost of delivering the resource to homes?
That's a great question, and that's absolutely true. What we're really paying for is we're paying for the aqueduct, the storage tanks, the pumping plants, the dams, the water treatment facilities, because the water in itself, we're just conveying it, but where all the expense is, 75% of the expense of a water utility is paying for all that concrete and steel and infrastructure to move the water around.
Right, so we've done a pretty good job conserving, but we have population growth So at some point, we have to address this because it's been since the 60s since we really did anything about it.
That's right, and that's really what it's about. It's aging infrastructure, and we need to upgrade it to meet the needs of the 21st century. We've more than quadrupled our population since the 1960s in Southern California, and we really do need to expand it and have it be more reliable. Certainly, it needs to be earthquake-proof.
Of course. And we've been having more and more earthquakes lately, so it's a great reminder that this is such an important project. What is the status of the project now?
They're completing the environmental review this summer, and hopefully by next year, spring of 2015, maybe summer of 2015, both the federal government and the governor and the state officials will approve a project, a recommendation to build these 2 tunnels in the Delta and then go forward with providing the other parts of the improvements so that we have stable earthquake-proof levees. The tunnels will be more reliable than the levees, and also do it in a way that both enhances the environment but also protects water quality so that we have the highest and best quality drinking water we can.
Okay, excellent. So you've kind of gone through the next steps. I want to ask you a little bit of a personal question because in our local government realm, you're known as the water guru. What got you into this business? How did you get to where you are to lead the Southern California Water Committee?
Well, I was fortunate. Early in my career after I graduated from college, I actually moved out of California. I went to Las Vegas and worked on the Colorado River. And you want to talk about water problems, scarcity, which is an important water supply for Southern California and really was our foundational why we created a regional government was the Metropolitan Water District, was to build Hoover Dam and the Colorado Aqueduct. I got involved with water, and it's a big issue for all of us, whether you live in Denver or Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Tucson. At that time, the 1970s, 1980s, the largest water project in the country was the Central Arizona project. And Arizona and California have been working together for the last 3 decades, something I'm really proud of, how to come up with common solutions on the Colorado River. And likewise, I think we in California, we need to all work together to have a statewide solution for water in California.
Great example of cooperation over borders.
Yep.
Super. Can you tell us just briefly, what is the Water Committee?
The Water Committee is a nonprofit, was formed back in 1984. And it really was to help explain, do public education, outreach, because in 1981, when the voters failed to approve the similar type fix in the Delta, Supervisor Harriet Weeder from Orange County said, you know, we need to be smarter about this. We need to have the public understand the water challenges, because the reality is, whether you live in San Jose or San Diego, very few people know where their water comes from. We've done a wonderful job of building this infrastructure, but now that it's aging and we need to reinvest in it, we need to educate the public that we do need to have an earthquake reliable water supply system.
Absolutely. So the Bay Delta Conservation Plan happens, we get our tunnel and our water down here. Are we done?
Well, there's always challenges in the future, but that facility will do a lot for us for the next century, much like Hoover Dam and the Colorado Aqueduct, built in the 1930s, has been our bedrock water supply for all of Southern California since, you know, the last 75, 80 years.
Sure. Well, Rich, I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with us today. I know you're a busy guy and you drove a long way, so thank you again, and keep us posted on the project, please.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. That's it for Civic Connection. We'll see you next time.